Kia ora tātou. So, ko Fiona Young aho. It's a pleasure to take a break, actually, from farm planning today to talk about farm planning. So myself and Tracey are going to tag team today. We've got a presentation that we're going to try and skip through so that we can answer questions at the end if possible. So essentially today, and I'm in charge of this, aren't I? Right, so in terms of overview, just going to figure out where to look. Right. So today we're going to go through a little bit of the context. Many of this part of it is known to you, but it's always useful to anchor ourselves when things get busy and tough as to why it is we're doing this. We'll touch briefly on the challenges, really kind of what's the setting for both the Southland and Waikato farm plan implementation, and then come up with some solutions and some of the things that we've found to be really important. Can I just, I guess, caveat at this stage that this presentation could probably go for 6 hours. We're going to make it go for 20 minutes. Very open, both myself, Tracey, and also Tracy Nelson, my colleague in Waikato, who can't be here today, are happy to answer the phone within reason. Yeah, we could maybe have those extra wines as well. And then we'll finish with some take-home messages. So that's our plan for today. So, Tracey, over to you.
Thanks, Fiona. Kia ora tātou katoa. E mihi ana ki ngā mana whenua, ko Waikato, te wakainga, ko Tracey toko ingoa. So, yep, I'm Tracey. I'm not actually the Tracey who wrote this presentation because, as Fiona says, she couldn't be here today. So I'll try to represent her thoughts, some of which I'll probably do better in some areas than others. So this slide, life before freshwater farm plans. So the Waikato region, particularly around effluence, pretty permissive framework, and I think this is a common challenge in some degrees to Environment Southland as well. For us, you can until a rule says that you can't. So basically it's quite a high trust model. So we've had education and advice as a key approach in the past. We've also got a really excellent document called the Farmer's Guide to Environment Rules, which we do have a lot of rules, and it focuses on giving those in a context that's relevant to farmers. It's an excellent document. And we used to have something called the Land Management Advisory Services team, LMAS, so you've possibly, quite a few of you have had something to do with the LMAS team in the past, and our focus was on workshops and field days. So yeah, really, really great, but we were only actually reaching the people that wanted to be reached.
So just the other part of the story around around the context is the environmental improvement. So let us never lose sight of what we are trying to achieve here. We're trying to look at lifting the environmental well-being of our regions. We're trying to lift water quality. We're trying to help our people in the community reach those outcomes of improved water quality, and also allow for things like drinking water and access to good water for swimming and other industries. In terms of the broader context, and we've heard about this from Gina this morning, that the regional solutions fit for purpose is really important. So for us, we've been having to navigate in Southland that dance between actually national regulations, but how do you implement this on the ground in the Southland setting? These clear expectations and timelines are really helpful. It allows for that all-in instead of actually some of the people that we've engaged with only in the past. A key thing for Southland has been weaving the tiomare through farm planning, and I know for Waikato as well, the opportunity and the way in which we bring Te Mana o Te Wai to life through these farm plans is absolutely essential. And given some of the conversations in our community at the moment, making sure that we do weave together rather than have pieces of information sitting side by side. So we want farmers to understand how their actions on farm achieve this broader goal of Te Mana o Te Wai, of improving the health of our waterways. Obviously, as we know, there's the key kind of new piece in this space is the catchment context. So having the risks and the actions be driven by the catchment context, the place in which that farm is located, is absolutely essential. And it does two things. Firstly, it ensures that what's been done on farm makes a difference, but secondly, it actually anchors the person, the place in the conversation. And monitoring, reporting and celebrating progress, and we've touched on that a little bit earlier, the way in which we report back on success is really challenging in a catchment context. So we can look at a whole catchment in terms of monitoring of environmental health. We can look at the region. What we want to do is make sure that we are rewarding the people who are doing these plans, our farmers, in terms of showing what they've delivered, how they've delivered, and actually how over time that's leading to an improvement. And I know that it takes time, and I know that this catchment connection between individual farms and catchments is difficult, but we have to find ways to do that. In terms of, am I forgetting to do that? Right. In terms of the challenges that we face, so just really the statistics. So for Waikato, overall, they have 9,000 landowners that need a freshwater farm plan. They are in the midst of Plan Change 1, which is currently in the Environment Court. For us in Southland Murihuku, we have approximately 3,500 landowners that need a farm plan, and we have the proposed Southland Water and Land Plan, which until, excitingly, 3 weeks ago, was in the Environment Court. We've now had a decisions version released, and importantly for us, it allows us to now go, what does that look like in terms of our Appendix N Farm Environmental Management Plan? How do we bring those together to be what we're going to call a Southland Farm Plan? So one farm plan that meets the obligations of both the national and regional regulations. In terms of the challenges, training of certifiers and auditors, we've had to stand up a whole process to actually be able to deliver that and to be able to deliver that in a meaningful way. It's a real strength of the system, but it does take time to actually get that put together in a way that actually is useful and meaningful in terms of delivering on the outcomes that we want both nationally and regionally. Changing the mindset of rural professionals and farmers, and look, we've had a number of people speak today about the importance of ensuring that we are connecting with our farmers, that they are empowered to be able to build these plans themselves, to have ownership in these plans, and actually that the actions that come out of them form part of the farm business. Again, the catchment context is really important. That's what brings the components together. We know that landowners are all at different stages in terms of the farm planning journey, and that has a significant influence on a number of parts of the story. For example, there's a lot of enthusiasm that we would go to digital tools. That is great, and I'm a huge supporter of that idea. The reality is that some of our farmers across the country won't have access to the internet, won't be able to use digital tools, and or they will find that a daunting proposition. It's not to say we shouldn't have that as a direction of travel, but we have to make sure in the materials and the approach that we take to delivering this system that we actually allow for all of the people that are in our community. And of course, we are the home of groundswell in Southland. I'm not sure that I'm proud of that, but certainly, there is no doubt that there are a large number of regulations that regional councils and farmers and our community are having to contend with and work through. And there is misinformation in our community around what that looks like and what that means. So all I can say for that is that we make sure we continue to focus with a human face. We bring a strong human face to what we do in developing these systems. So moving quickly, hopefully, on to solutions. So in setting up, so obviously as it was mentioned earlier, we have tested some of this through the pilot, and we are now in the rollout stage, and for us in Southland, we will move very quickly into business as usual next year for this. Things that have been important for us collectively between Waikato and Southland in terms of implementation, cross-organisational teams. All of us out there who are part of beautiful councils or even any large organisation, you must talk to other people. You need other people to come together as teams to be able to deliver this. It's not a planning thing. It's not a consents thing. It's not an IT thing. It's all in together. And having the cross-organisational team certainly for us has been absolutely essential to being able to deliver in the way that we are. Quality control, compliance and monitoring, that speaks to the integrity of the system. So we have to be able to know that there is consistency across the system, that there is some sense of parameters around what's expected, that we are reporting on that so that we can show that the investment in the system, whoever you are, is making a difference. Much to be said, and we will speak again a bit more about this in terms of engagement. Again, in terms of even our environmental challenges, it is people on the ground who will actually resolve these challenges, and the farm plan is a framework or a system to do that. So how we engage is essential. working with iwi, hapu and Māori landowners is absolutely fundamental. So our obligations to the treaty have been present in our legislation for a long time. However, the MPS for Freshwater and the introduction of Te Mana o Te Wai has really, I think, lifted the game and the focus on ensuring we think about how we look after our water from a Māori perspective. For us in Southland, through work we've done, Hauora over the next 25 years is the goal that we're working to. That's what it looks like for us, so a healthy, resilient environment. And again, these farm plans it's a matter of actually going from your 25-year onwards horizon. How do you deliver that across 5 years? And then how do you deliver that across 1 year? So this is some of the work we're going to have to do to help farmers understand how they bring that higher goal into on-farm actions in a 12-month period. Aligning and meeting both the national and regional or local regulations. So as I indicated, both ourselves and Waikato have plan changes either in the process or coming through the process or out the other end of the process. That's a very much a reality in terms of system design. The system has to speak to what's happening on the ground in the regions, what's happening in the policy constructs, in our case coming out of the Environment Court, and the direction of travel that's signalled. So you need in that cross-organisational team to make sure you have some good planning heads who are coming together to go, actually, how do these things fit together? How do we knit it together? And importantly then, how do we tell that story? How do we develop our materials and our training to actually reflect that? And in saying that, we'll talk about this a bit more, I think we reinforce this, but we have a beautiful opportunity here in the group of people who are connecting a lot with our farmers, so our rural professionals, not just farm advisors, across the board, to actually help them understand the change that has happened with the likes of Te Mana o Te Wai in terms of direction. So it's a great opportunity. It has afforded us a real opportunity to lift knowledge and understanding in an operational way, in an implementation-focused way. And again, that's the opportunity to have assessors and certifiers in place. Tracey.
So as Fiona has pointed out, regional planning outcomes are going to have an impact in this space. For us it's PC1, for you, congratulations. A little bit jealous. Yeah. Some of the complicating factors when our organisation was looking at how do we actually roll out these farm plans, 9,000 farms in a short time frame is quite challenging. So some of the things that we considered that you may find useful to think about are those regional planning outcomes, other uses for farm plans, so intensive winter grazing, for example. The scaling over time to support the resource availability. You know, as a council, we are variable in our sizes and our resources. So how do we do that with the sheer scale of farms that we have? And also around that engagement space, the catchment-based approach gives an aid to communications and helps us during the implementation phase. And also prioritising areas where action's needed sooner. So we do have some areas, particularly the Waipa and the Waikato, where we've got some significant challenges for sediment and other contaminants. So taking on with that theme, thank you. You can see here to the right is the Waikato rollout strategy. Waipa went first, 1st of August this year, 2023, and so we have had, we'll talk a little bit more about the engagement later on, but that was the choice that we went with in terms of the importance of that area and its significance to freshwater for us. Next off the rank, you'll see the West Coast and Upper Waikato, so that's more about contaminants, but the West Coast, it's got quite an intensive winter grazing occupation over other areas, so that was part of that consideration, and then carry on with that rollout going forward.
And just briefly for Southland, as per I mentioned, obviously our proposed Southland Water and Land Plan. So through the court processes, it's been very clear that we have quite an extensive degradation of waterways across the whole region. So it actually wasn't possible for us to do kind of a prioritisation exercise. We essentially went with Aparima first because that's where we tried our pilot, and then we sort of went out from there. So we went right to left, sort of. So, but I guess it's been essential that we have that sort of staged approach to make sure that we can bring together the catchment context information as we go. And Aparima is our smallest catchment, so about 650 farm plans to do in that catchment. It's made up of 3 reporting areas.
So this is an area that I do know a little bit about. One of my tasks since I started at the Regional Council in February was to kind of step into this freshwater space and start looking at the training for certifiers. So our methodology, once again, is quite similar to Environment Southland. We've got an online component, so once potential certifiers come through the national system, they come through, we have taken information that we think is relevant to us as a region and tried to put that in an easily accessible format. So we've structured it with an overarching introduction to the Waikato region, and then within each component, tangata whenua, land and soil, water bodies and effluent, we've kind of split it up into the impacts on freshwater, the regulations around them, and then sort of combine that with the farming activities and what does that mean in a freshwater farm planning space. I'd like to make a quick shout out to QCons, who we have worked with intensively around this, taking our material and putting it into a format. They've been really amazing to work with, so thank you for that. So once the certified applicants have completed that training, then they come through to us and indicate that they're willing to keep going. And so we look at that next step of in-person. So we've had one group through, and we are learning as we go. So now our next group, we're going to sort of talk to them a little bit beforehand with a short webinar, where they're going to do a gap analysis on a farm environment plan, and then come to an on-farm day, and then do some homework, which is once again similar to Environment Southland. So we're looking, these are the first sort of cabs off the rank, and going forward we'll be looking at further courses as our regional plans dictate, PC1, nutrient management, and potentially sector specific. So I guess a thing to kind of point out or accentuate here is the opportunity for certifiers to have that relationship within the council. It's going to be really key. It's going to be an ongoing learning process for all of us, and I think that intersect between the implementation and then our compliance is an interesting intersect. So stay here. So the other really key point is that, you know, like, certifiers aren't going to be able to certify farm plans very easily if those farm plans don't actually come up to a certain standard. It's going to create some difficulties and potentially some barriers. So our hope in terms of developing our training as well is that we've made it accessible to farmers and farm plan developers to actually come through that system and understand what is required for a freshwater farm plan, so that that workforce can actually ease that pathway and we don't get stuck part way through. So that's really critical for the success of the system. So we're going to need a large number of developers, so if you know people who are interested, give them some encouragement to come through some of the training as well. So iwi engagement in the Waikato, you know, it's a particular field, and it requires time, and we haven't really had the luxury of that at the beginning. So this is something that we're going to need to keep working through and working on and with. So in the Waikato, we've had some regular hui, and we've got an internal team called Tairanga Whenua who work really do a lot of mahi in the out in our region. We've got quite a complex number and ownership, I guess, with the iwi in the Waikato region. There's lots of cross-boundary and many iwi, and I think it creates challenges. You don't want to speak for one. It's difficult to speak for all without speaking for one over another, and so those are challenges that are going to be ongoing. So that communication is really important, that collaboration. So basically the strategy is to work with tauranga whenua to identify iwi in the catchment and the key contact people. Hold a kind of informational warm-up hui to get that information out there to the key contacts, and then follow up individually afterwards to sort of build those relationships, build those trust points, and then proceed with some of the information that comes from that. So this is multifaceted. It's for catchment context. It's also for certifier or auditor roles. What's the potential out there, and also for training material. What is it that iwi would like to see in terms of the training for certifiers?
So I'm conscious of time, but I really want to acknowledge the pōrunaka that mana whenua in Southland and Murihuku. So we've worked really closely with Tia Marama, who has represented us from those pōrunaka. They've connected with whānau, and we've worked really hard to co-develop our catchment context. We've co-developed our regional training, and we continue to work together in terms of the delivery of this with that goal of hauora, te mano o te wai, at the front of our minds. And I have to acknowledge the people who have been involved, because it's an enormous effort. There's a huge call on time of mana whenua these days, and I really want to acknowledge the work that they have done, because I think it's going to make a material impact in terms of the outcomes that we're all seeking. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to unfortunately skip through that one, which is, in brief, we've done a huge amount of work with stakeholders, whether it be industry, whether it be with mana whenua, whether it be with the groups that are supporting, and again, probably that's a whole presentation in itself as to how we've set up some of the strategic and operational engagement that we're doing. So just to conclude, take-home messages. Everything does take longer than you think. It's probably not rocket science. It does take longer than you think, and if we presume that people are at the heart of this system, then actually, as someone said, I think yesterday, it's a social messy process, and we have to be prepared for that. We have had some time constraints on us, but we have worked with integrity actually to work through particularly some of those people-focused discussions, and continue to do so. Have a solid understanding of your expectations of the national certification and audit and training, and you need to invest some work to actually have a successful regional training, and as I said earlier, that's actually fundamental to lifting or changing the way in which we think about our freshwater management. Ongoing support for certifiers is critical. Things are changing sort of daily at the moment in the policy space, so we need to make sure that we are updating as we go. The farm plan developer, as Tracey mentioned, is critical to the success of the system. We also need to work with industry to support landowners, and so there's a lot of investment for us, particularly going across all sectors actually, but we're very conscious that there's some sectors with less support, and we're wanting to look at how we can help develop that. And just to remember, this is a system to improve water quality, and I say this quite seriously, we do collectively have an opportunity to make a difference here, and so the work we can do and invest in the people in this room, you're all instrumental in making that happen. The people, of course, that by and large aren't here are our community, and working with them is equally important. And just actually to conclude too, I really want to acknowledge from both ourselves in Southland and from Waikato that there are a number of organisations and agencies, MFE and others, I've talked about iwi as well, farmer groups helping us do this. Certainly we haven't been able to do that without you. This is not something we're doing by ourselves. So kia ora, thank you very much for listening, and good luck.
And usual, there are some questions from the audience.
God, okay. Right, so do you want shall we just have a go? Number of quality of certifiers to get the job done within the expected timeframes. So we're positive that for us in Southland, I believe we've got 25 people who are registered and going through the certification process for you in Waikato.
We'd like to see 40 to 50
Yep.
certifiers.
Is that going to meet 600 farm plans in the next 18 months? Quite possibly not. But again, how we set the system up and the materials and the collateral we have and the guidance in terms of what's expected is a critical success factor in that space. Is there any significant? Yeah. So no, some people are not passing. That's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? No, so for a range of reasons, there are some people that are not getting through the entire process or that have to kind of revisit and go through the process.
I think on that point we would say that once they come to us, we would look to continue those conversations if there was difficulty with them getting through our regional training. So we would just like to keep those relationships.
Yeah. So in terms of the question about the subjective decisions between developers and certifiers, what we have, so firstly, the live conversation at the moment is how many and how much has to be done in terms of actions. So that's something that we are on the ground discussing, I think, in both regions actually, to determine how we actually, because what we can say is that, they have to be reasonable, that they have to be related to a risk that comes from your catchment context, but actually I think that there's going to be some work we'll need to do, it's a piece of work we'll need to do to give some more guidance as to how many actions, how you incorporate permitted activity actions, for example. So watch this space and feel free to kind of stay in contact on that one. And certainly the live conversation, which is slightly untidy, is people looking to the future of things like limit setting processes and how might the farm plans be part of that conversation. My answer to that is a future process, and we need to get the initial system set up first and working well, and then the opportunities for other benefits that come from having a structured farm plan system will come in time. Yeah, so we've had that discussion internally about council staff being certifiers. So feel free to chip in. So in terms of the council staff, so there's nothing to stop them going through the training. I think that's really helpful because actually when they're working to support farmers in the community, they understand what expectations there will be in terms of the farm plan development. Whether you want to set up a business unit that has certifiers is probably up to yourselves as individual councils. The one thing I would say is there's a real opportunity to upskill our rural professionals and to build a body of knowledge and a body of energy in our community who can help support farmers. I think we have had that conversation somewhere earlier that council doesn't have to be the only one holding the talking stick here. In fact we don't want to be. So the certification process really offers an opportunity in that space, and I'd probably be sad to see that sort of retained, if you like, in house and council. I think it's a lost opportunity.
I think you covered that really well, Fiona. So maybe I'll look at that next question. What was your decision process? Oh, sorry. What was your decision process in deciding how detailed you made each of your catchment contexts? So I can partly answer that. I think for us it was how do you take into account a farm that's a dairy farm that's in mainly a hill country farm area, and say, okay, nitrogen's a problem when actually, phosphorus is a problem when actually, they're contributing nitrogen. So we looked at it on a broad scale and looked at basically having the 4 contaminants. So that's a part answer. I should say that with any questions that you have, please feel free to email Tracey Nelson, not me. And she'd be really happy to answer any of your questions, but you might want to
so one thing actually I was going to mention, and I see there's a question there about farms' existing plans. So we are working with some of the groups that have existing farm plans. Through Southland we had focused activity farm plans for a number of years before sort of the regulatory space came on board. So it's my very strong view, excuse me, that people should be able to transition their farm plans. They must be able to transition their existing farm plans. So then it's an exercise to go, actually, what is in their current farm plan? Where are the gaps in terms of the farm plan regulations? And then what does that mean in terms of adding information? Might that look a little bit untidy to start with? Well, possibly. But actually, are we doing the exercise, particularly of going, here's the catchment context, because that will be different. Here's the catchment context. Here are the inherent vulnerabilities and the risks that arise from that, and here are the actions coming out the end of it.
There are quite a few others on the list, but I've got one here which I think we might just finish with, and that relates to iwi, which has suddenly disappeared. Where'd it go?
Was it difficult?
Oh no. How are you, or are you ensuring that iwi values are linked into CCVs as you are continually engaging with them?
Oh, exciting. Can I just actually say one thing? So in the course of doing this, we've had triple CV, we've had CCVCs, CC, I don't know. Please just call it catchment context. We think it's hilarious, this acronym, but our community think it's just ridiculous. So just I guess that's a thing that I try and impress upon people. Even though, and if you need to say the whole 4 words, that's fine as well, but do not use the acronym. Right, sorry, did you want to?
I guess I just mention that in the Waikato region we've got lots of iwi who have iwi environmental management plans. So that's really the first port of call, really, is to look into those. A lot of them have got really clear visions and really clear priorities, and also some of them have actually got actions that they would like you to uptake as well. So that's a really good first port of call. If you, as a farmer, have additional knowledge to that, great to include that as well. So.
And just from our iwi perspective, we have run a process over the last, it's finished now, but the last sort of 3 or 4 years, the regional forum process. Through that process, we engaged with our community, and we engaged with iwi who had their own wānanga. And actually the page, there was a document up on the slide, happy to circulate for anyone who's interested, but we brought together basically a shared set of values that represent both iwi and community values for Southland. That's a document you can read. You can also then look at where we are at across the key contaminants in terms of the gap between a healthy, resilient environment, or hauora, and where we are sitting right now. And we also did some work to show where we're sitting in terms of the planning processes that we have. So that information has been absolutely instrumental to informing the catchment context. And when we have created our first 3 catchment contexts, we've done that in collaboration with Te Marama. So the catchment context reflects the weaving together of those iwi and community values, and the information that we recommend in terms of highlighting key contaminants is basically embedded in that catchment context. So that's the same with our regional training as well. And so we are fortunate that we've had that commitment from whānau and from Te Marama, both now but also over the last 5 years, to actually build that picture. And it's absolutely been critical, and I can only again I can't thank enough the people who have brought that to be for Southland.
I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much. So just a
thank you.
quick round of applause.